morning. Thank you so much. Thank you. Good morning. Great to be back in Ybor City at HCC. Thanks for hosting us, and we're excited about today's announcement. And joining me for today's announcements are Attorney General Ashley Moody, as well as our Commissioner of Education, Manny Diaz, and the Chancellor of the State University System of Florida, Ray Rodriguez. We'll also hear from a mother of three here in Hillsborough County, Kimberly Davis. And then we've got a motley crew of legislators here today. We have Senator Jay Collins and Senator Danny Burgess are here. And then we have Representatives Gonzalez-Pittman, Koster, and Cheney, and I want to thank all of them for their hard work, particularly over these last 6 to 8 months. We've done an awful lot, and we signed the budget last week, of course, I think most of you know, and we're in really, really good shape. I think Florida, we have millions of more people than New York does now, and our budget's half the size of theirs. But I think our services and infrastructure and education are all better, so why are you spending all that money and taxing people like that? So I think we're showing how it's done, and I think these legislators, have really helped lead the way. So thank you for what you've been able to do. So you may have surmised that we're going to be talking about higher education today, and we are going to be taking an action to defend Florida's higher education system. We are currently ranked #1 in the nation for higher education by some of these publications. And one of the reasons we are is we are the lowest in America for tuition and fees in higher education, and that's really important. And I don't think we have done tuition increases in Florida, I think, for about 10 years. And so that's something that's been very, very significant. I think if you look over the last generation, academic inflation has been like way, way, way over and above anything with normal inflation. And part of the reason for that is people in my generation, when we were coming up, and people a little bit after us too, were basically told, you're not going to be successful unless you go get a college degree. And while that's great to aspire to, and we want to have pathways for people, you had a generation of students who went deep into debt, and many of them had degrees that weren't necessarily putting them in a position to do anything special in the economy. We had a generation of kids end up in jobs they could have at a high school with $50,000 to $100,000 in debt. And so that is not a good way to go about this. And the tragic thing of it is a lot of the loan money that would go and be available would help lead to pressure to increase tuition because they knew they could get money. And then the money they were getting with increased tuition was not improving the education outcomes. It was increasing administrative bloat and things that really had no direct impact on the quality of education. So I think that the tuition increases we've seen around the country, huge increases, massive loans, massive debt, that is not the way to do it. So I'm proud in the state of Florida that we're making this affordable for people. If you are in state going to a state university and you have good marks in high school and test scores, you get a full tuition scholarship with bright futures. And even if you're not at that level, maybe you get 75%. So we're really making it, I think, attainable for people. You can go get a high quality education and not be $100,000 in debt. That sets people up for success. And it's not just our universities. Our state college system has been increasingly nimble about identifying the type of skills that are in demand and that make a difference in the economy, and then applying programs so that we're able to meet those needs. And we rely on our state colleges to do that. We've expanded things like commercial driver's license. We used to do 600 truck drivers a year in Florida. Now we're up to 3,500 we can produce a year in the state of Florida. And guess what? If you get that, you're probably going to make $100,000 to start. I know you do at Walmart. I think they do $110,000 there. And there's a whole bunch of other things, nursing programs, because we know we need more nurses, all these other things that we're really proud of, but we're proud that we're doing it in a way that's attainable for people and affordable for people. We are #2 in the nation for our 2-year graduation rate. Obviously, that's a testament to our state college system. and then number 4 for 4-year graduation rate. You know, the dirty little secret is a lot of these universities kind of want to incentivize you to do 5 or 6 years because, you know, they just get to pocket more tuition money. You drag it out a little bit. You know, us in Florida, we very much expect the 4-year graduation, and that's really where we try to go. So we want you in, and we have some students I know. I mean, I've got people on my staff who graduated with a bachelor's degree in like 2.5 years. And so we want to do that. Get in, get what you need, and then go get on with your life. It's really, really significant. So we're proud of all that. You know, and at the same time, I think we recognize in Florida that these institutions, you know, are not existing in a vacuum. These are not institutions that could exist without the support of the taxpayers of the state of Florida. They are funding billions and billions of dollars into these systems because we think it's important. But I think one of the things that goes along with that is if Florida taxpayers are footing the bill for this, we need to ensure that these systems are accountable to the best interests of the state of Florida and the people that you elect to oversee the budget and oversee the administration of this. There's a strain of thought that somehow, you know, if you step on a university campus, that somehow you just do whatever you want, and even though you're funded by the taxpayers, there can be no meaningful oversight or making sure that we're focused in the proper direction. We reject that in Florida. I mean, we think not only do we have the right to ensure that the universities are pursuing the proper mission, we have a responsibility to ensure that universities are pursuing the core mission. And for us, you know, we believe in the traditional mission of a university to pursue truth, to be able to promote rigor in academic discourse, and to prepare students to be citizens of this republic. And I know that that's not necessarily, that may have fallen out of fashion in many parts of the country, but we don't think that the purpose of universities is to impose an ideological agenda. There should be freedom of discussion, freedom of speech, and there shouldn't be an imposition of an orthodoxy. And we've just been very clear on that. And we've done things not only to make sure that we stay on track with the core mission, but also to make sure there's accountability writ large in the university. And we've enacted over the recent years a number of reforms that we think are very, very positive. One, we've actually legislative reforms so that these accreditors, and I'll talk more about those in a minute, these accrediting agencies are not the end-all be-all, that we have an ability to go seek different accreditors to make sure that we're getting the proper accreditation. And the reason why that's important is because they tie all the federal money to it. So if somebody, now granted, our university system, you don't necessarily need to take out a lot of federal loans because it's affordable, but people sometimes do, a Pell Grant, all these things. If you don't get accredited, then they will not give any of this federal aid. And so who these accreditors are, nobody really knows any of these people. Who elected them? Nobody elected them. They're just kind of existing, you know, out there in the ether, and we're supposed to genuflect without any accountability. And so we've recognized that is not appropriate. Second, we now have in Florida, all tenured professors must undergo review every 5 years and can be let go for poor performance. And I think that if you talk to people who are wise in the ways of these world, they will tell you that one of the most significant dead weight costs in a university is unproductive tenured faculty. And so, you know, our view is you know, this is an appropriate check and balance on trying to prevent that. On the one hand, there is a role for tenure, and because we thought about, should we just not have it at all? And I was sympathetic to that because I'm like, you know what, we can just hire people to do a good job or whatever. But we had during COVID, you know, you had some tenured faculty at places like Stanford who were speaking out very early against lockdowns, against forced masking, against school closures. And I guarantee with the hysteria that was happening, you know, those people would have definitely been run out of town. They would have lost their jobs, you know, if they didn't have tenure. So I do think that there is value in that. So I think we struck the appropriate balance with what we've done, but what it's going to end up doing is it's going to provide very positive turnover. We've put in huge amount of money directly to the university presidents so that they can go out and recruit new faculty. So, you know, you're in University of Florida, you want to go to MIT, bring somebody to come engineer, you can do it. It's almost like free agency. And so we're giving money to be able to do that. And I think that that's going to be something that's very significant. We've also done great work to ensure seamless transitions when you go from state college to university. Very important that we keep that pipeline going. We have nixed so-called DEI at universities in the state of Florida. I mean, we believe in treating people as individuals. We do not believe in divvying up, and it should be based on merit and achievement. And that's where we're going in the state of Florida. And I think a lot of states are now going to be following suit with that. We also are re-empowering our university presidents to be the final decision maker at their schools when it comes to personnel actions. And so the question is, should the faculty unions be the ultimate decider, or should the president and the board of trustees, who are really our representatives through the governor's appointments on there, and we believe it should be ultimately the president and the board, because they're accountable, at least indirectly, to the people of Florida. Faculty unions are just not accountable. And I also think as we're striving for more intellectual diversity, the more power these faculty unions have, I think the more apt they are to force people to toe the ideological line. And so this has been, I think, a series of very positive reforms that are reorienting our higher education system, I think, in a really good direction. Now, that brings us to why we're here today, because all the things I just said, I think most people would say, you know, make sense. I think vast majority of people would agree with it, but even if you don't agree with it, I think clearly these are reasonable policy choices that we're choosing to pursue. Well, these accreditation agencies don't believe that. They believe they know better than the people of Florida. They believe that Florida should potentially lose student aid as a result of making these types of reforms. And so the Biden administration is seeking to crack down on the state of Florida for what we are doing. And the way it works is there's accreditors, and the Department of Education approves whoever they want to be an accreditor. And then under their theory, the accreditor can serve as a veto against the entire state of Florida. That if our legislature passes, reasonable reforms, governor signs it, that they somehow get a veto of that process. And I've read the state and federal constitutions a lot, and I don't recall seeing that clause in either of those constitutions. And so we reject the idea that a totally unaccountable, unappointed, unelected accrediting agency can trump what the state of Florida is doing. And some of these things we did prior to the election, and we ran on it in the election. And this was a big part of what we did. So we have this one, the Southern SACS, they call it, Southern Accreditation Agency here. And, they try to stick their beak into different things with all this. The president of SACS, is quoted as saying, governing boards are the ones that are responsible for ensuring the well-being of the institution, not the governor, not the legislatures, not Jane and John Citizen. And so, that's a view that really this board trumps the entire state of Florida. We reject that. And so today we're going to do something about it. It's not just that doesn't make sense to have these accreditation agencies have so much power. We believe it violates the law and the federal Constitution to allow them to exercise such power. So the Attorney General and I today are filing a lawsuit against the Biden administration, against the Department of Education, Secretary Cardona, and other plaintiffs. And we're asking the court to find this arrangement to be unconstitutional. And it's unconstitutional in a couple ways. First, you cannot take legislative power and delegate it to an unaccountable private body and let them administer that power without any type of checks and balances. And so we believe it violates what's called the private non-delegation doctrine, and we think that we're going to be right on it because, I mean, there's over $100 billion in student aid every year that hinges on the decisions of these accreditation agencies. And yet Congress has basically just said, you do it, you know, we're going to stay out of it. And understand why they did it, because they didn't want federal control of education. And so in some respects, I appreciate that. But on the flip side, you now have a situation where these unaccountable private bodies are wielding huge power. I mean, if you're making a decision that could affect billions of dollars of funding, you know, that is really, really significant. And in America, you need to be accountable to somebody. And right now, they're accountable to nobody. So that's one reason we're doing. We're also saying that it violates the Appointments Clause of the Constitution. If this is exercising government power effectively, then people that get appointed need to be confirmed by the Senate like any other executive branch appointee. That doesn't happen here. There's no vetting whatsoever. And then finally, the Spending Clause. It's effectively a condition on federal spending. And while Congress can do that, they got to be explicit about it, and they're limited in how broadly they can do it. So we believe these are really, really strong counts. We believe that we have a great chance of succeeding in this lawsuit. Now, ultimately, what we need is a competitive market in accreditation. You know, it's one thing if there were accreditors out there and you could freely choose where you wanted to go, then I think we would be probably not even having this discussion now. But we're in a situation where that's not the case, where we're expected to go to this one accreditor, and this is an accreditor that has an agenda. And why should that agenda be our agenda? Nobody voted for that agenda. They did vote for the agenda in the legislature and what we've signed into law. So I think it's important because it shapes how our institutions of higher education operate. And so often they have to do things to please accreditors. And so if the accreditors really want to move the institutions in one way, right now, they basically have the authority to do it. And so we're going to put a stop to that, and we're going to make sure that ultimately our institutions are going to be governed by the best interests of the people and the best interests of the state. And when you're forking over billions of dollars as taxpayers for these institutions, you have every right to ensure that there's adequate accountability and that these institutions are pursuing the mission that the people of this state believe in. And so we're taking that step today. And I think we're going to be successful. And I think that this will really open up the floodgates for more innovation in higher education. I think that you could have really great competing accredited bodies. And I think that that's something that all states should have access to. So this is the first step in that, but I think we're going to end up seeing it. And within the next couple years, I think we're going to see this accreditation cartel basically come crumbling down and more freedom in higher education reigning supreme. So that will be a good thing for this country. Okay, we will have, we're going to hear from some of our folks here today. We're going to hear from some of our great folks today. So first, spearheading the effort today and following the lawsuit, I believe down in Fort Lauderdale. Is that where we're filed? So the lawsuit filed down in Fort Lauderdale in federal court, federal district court, is our Attorney General Ashley Moody, and she's got a pretty good record going against the Biden administration. So let me remind you.
Thank you, Governor. You know, I believe the governor's comments and introduction of what we are trying to do shows why Florida is leading the nation on so many of these critical issues in our states. In fact, I cannot think of a governor or any leader who is more diligent when in his gut he questions the nonsense of something, or when he sees why something has been set up for so long and a practice has been entrenched for so long, and he said, that doesn't make sense. We can't govern like that. That does not make sense. And instead of bellyaching and complaining and throwing up his arms and saying, it's just been done like that a long time, it must be right, he digs in, understands always with a lens of constitutional principles What is it that the people have entrusted to a limited government? What is it that the people expect of this process and this practice? And is it even lawful? And I cannot tell you how many times when we've had these discussions, when he has a sense that something isn't right or something isn't legal or something isn't permitted under the Constitution, and we dig in, sure enough, he says, let's get him, let's go. And I saw it uniquely, always, Governor, and I don't want to say that I didn't, but especially during COVID. Especially during COVID. People would make generalized pronouncements. They would enact practices and policies, and he would say, that just doesn't feel right. And that is because he is a true leader that respects our Constitution. And more than that, he understands that that Constitution is the permission slip that we, the people, gave to this government. And so today, is just a reflection of we, the people, ensuring that it is us, we, that is running government, that is having a say in these practices. All post-secondary educational institutions must, it's not voluntary, you must be accredited by a private accrediting agency to be eligible for federal funding. Congress cannot delegate its authority to a private institution that's not accountable to the people. That's unchecked power, as the governor said. And he has said the legislature, our great legislature, we have our senators and representatives with us today, have tried to play a part in ensuring that we are promoting free discourse and making sure we're having the best leadership and standards in our institutions. And so many times these private accrediting agencies come in and try and trump that. That didn't feel right. And it's not just the most recent actions. I just want to go through with you some examples of the audacity of the belief of these private organizations that they are the emperors of education, that their standards are what goes, that they have the say and all of the standards that are imposed on our institutions. Just listen to some of these examples on how they felt like they were the governing body. In 2021, they threatened the accreditation status of FSU because the Florida Board of Governors was considering our Commissioner of Education for the FSU president, for a single university. They said, and I quote, "It endangered the institution's access to federal financial aid." And that was not the first time they threatened Florida's institutions. Following a deadly hazing incident at Florida A&M University in 2011, then Governor Rick Scott publicly suggested that the university's president, we should consider suspension. The accrediting agency responded by chastising the governor for daring to express his opinion on a state-owned university that threatened FREMU's accreditation. In 2013, they threatened the accreditation status of the University of Florida when the president was asked to postpone his retirement for a brief time. In other states, and Governor, I wouldn't be surprised if other states follow your brave lead. In other states, in 2012, the accreditation agency threatened the University of Virginia because the school's governing board asked the president to resign. In 2019, they threatened the University of South Carolina because Governor Henry McMaster, who, by the way, served as a member of the school's board of trustees by law, was involved in selecting the university's next president. And more recently, they picked a fight with the University of North Carolina, UNC, over the creation of a new program, which was voted on by the UNC Board of Trustees that promised to hire professors from across the ideological spectrum and was designed to end political constraints on what could be taught in university classes. The officials said, we'll either get them to change it or the institution will be on warning. We assume institutions are innocent until proven guilty. The audacity, the ever-increasing power grab by private agencies over the state's ability to govern taxpayer-funded institutions has been astounding. And rather than sit back any longer and watch the threats continue to escalate, with the assumption it's always been done this way and maybe there's nothing we can do. That ends today. It is unconstitutional, it is illegal, and with this action we are taking back the power to oversee our institutions by the people that fund it and this great state rightfully. And thank you, Governor DeSantis, for your bold leadership.
Okay. All right, Manny.
Thank you, Governor DeSantis and Attorney General Moody. Governor DeSantis, through your leadership, it's clear why we're #1 in education. And this is an example here where the lawsuit affirms the principles of federalism. How can a state and a legislature that's duly elected, a governor that's duly elected, sign policies and have one single accreditor hold our institutions hostage? It is best for each individual institutions, both in the state college system and in the university system, to be able to seek the accreditor that best fits them and to end this monopoly so that this extortion cannot go on at the hands of a private entity, and what's best for the students of Florida and the taxpayers of Florida. So I applaud Governor DeSantis for his leadership. The reason we're #1 is because, as Attorney General Moody said, he sees a problem, and maybe that problem's been going on for a long time, but just because it has, he doesn't sit there and say, we're gonna be okay with it. In this case, it's clearly, we've taken action legislatively. I was fortunate to still be in the Senate and carry that piece of legislation, and I'm very happy to see our governor and our attorney general lead in this fight to make sure that it's implemented, because these are the duly elected leaders of the people of the state of Florida and what's best for our students. Thank you very much, Governor and Attorney General.
Good morning. Governor, I want to thank you for your leadership. I'm going to echo the commissioner. Actions like these demonstrate why you're America's governor, because while you're taking action to protect Floridians, the entire country is ultimately going to benefit from this action. I know for many of you this is a surprise that we've come up today and announced there's going to be litigation against the U.S. federal government. And many of you may think it's coming out of nowhere. I'm going to take just 2 minutes and give you some background, because this has been a long time coming. Since World War II, we have been in a situation where there are regional monopolies in the area of accreditation. So depending on where your university or college was located, it was dictated whom your accreditor would be. And because we're in the Southeast, our accreditor was SACS. Under Betsy DeVos as Education Secretary, the Department of Education went through rulemaking and they blew up the monopoly aspect of accreditation. And in theory, if the Department of Education is following their own rules, we should get to choose which of the regional accreditors we go to. And so that's what's happened here. 6 months ago, the University of Central Florida submitted a request to move from SACS to the Higher Learning Commission as an accreditor. We did not receive a response. Actually, it was 7 months ago that they made their request. We went 6 months hearing nothing from the Department of Education on this response. And when they finally did respond, they didn't give us the answer as they're required to by their rule. Instead, they responded with more questions. And I want to make sure everyone understands, we didn't send a one-page letter notifying Department of Education that University of Central Florida wishes to move. It was a 14-page letter that section by section provided the information we were required to by the Federal Code of Regulations and the guidance that had been issued by the Department of Education, identifying why they wanted to move and how it served the interest of our students. 14 pages, plus there was an appendix that was probably another 100 pages attached to that, which was required. There was nothing left out of this application. And yet, 6 months later, we still don't have an answer. The Department of Education holds themselves up as if their action is to protect quality. And that's why they're delaying the response to the University of Central Florida. Did you know that there are nearly 50 four-year nonprofit colleges and universities who have graduation rates of 20% or less, and they're still accredited by SACS? And this is the accreditor that the federal government wants to hold us hostage to and be trapped, only to be accredited by them. University of Central Florida is an emerging, preeminent university in our state. Their long-term plan is to achieve the metrics that will qualify them for preeminence and ultimately apply for admission to the AAU, which is the most elite higher education organization in the country. Only 3% of Tier 1 research universities are invited, and yet those 3% achieve over 60% of federal research dollars. That is UCF's long-term plan. There is no regional accreditor in the country who has accredited more AAU universities than the Higher Learning Commission. They are the accreditor that is known for innovation among the 7 regional accreditors. They are the accreditor that best fits the long-term plan for the University of Central Florida and their students. And the federal government continues to obstruct us. Not only do we have all these strong constitutional challenges that the governor has identified and we are going to win, but even beyond that, the Department of Education is not even following their own rule. We are a nation built on the rule of law. The law applies to everyone, whether you're John Q. citizen or the U.S. federal government. And I'm thankful for the Attorney General and our governor to hold our federal government accountable to that principle. Thank you.
Note to the scheduler, please don't make the mom go after that. You guys are hard act to follow. My name is Kimberly Davis. It's an honor to be here. Governor, Attorney General, Manny Diaz, thank you all for everything that you're doing for us. It's an honor. I want to thank you for continuing to stand strong for parents like me and all of us to fight in our fight to protect our children. When my oldest daughter was accepted to UNF, we were very proud. We only toured Florida schools. We were doubly proud when she was offered scholarships from UNF and Bright Futures and federal grants like the Pell Grant. Florida's higher education system is one that I know, FSU girl, go, and one that I trust. We've been #1 in the country for 7 years in a row. Families are flocking to the great free state of Florida, thank you, Governor, in record numbers, and I know that our world-class higher education system is one of those reasons. And thank you for making it affordable as well. In Florida, our parents, teachers, and professors will focus on education, not woke ideology. I do not want any outside influence, especially from accreditation organizations like SACS, and more importantly, from our current federal government. Right now, unelected federal bureaucrats in DC are trying to run this state. We need to remind them that our governor, Ron DeSantis, runs this state. He never backs down from a fight, and he will always have the backs of parents and protect our ability to choose what is right for our children. In a rogue accreditation agency like SACS, wants to play political games of ideology instead of supporting my daughter's earned education. She worked for that. Thank you for helping her. Governor DeSantis is absolutely right to go another way, and thank you for Ashley Moody for filing the lawsuit. Thank you, Governor, for everything you do and are doing to keep Florida free, safe, and #1 in higher education. All right. Thank you.
You know, we're proud to have led on a lot of issues. We're leading again today, and you know, I was kind of, you know, sometimes like we kind of take it for granted. Obviously, we see people moving here. We see people visiting in record numbers. I mean, you know, they do these political stunts to try to say, "Don't come to Florida," and they're just trying to attack me. But like, and then like people respond with like record Memorial Day, record all this stuff. So I mean, I think like the people, you know, trying to stop it just hasn't worked. But you appreciate it when you see some other parts of the country. So I was recently in San Francisco, and you know, you see things. I meet people who fled there, and you hear stories. But then when you see it, it's sad. And the thing is it's not something that was preordained. It was something as a result of choices that were made by people governing by ideology. I saw people, I was on the streets for maybe 20 minutes. I saw people defecating on the sidewalk. I saw people using fentanyl openly. I saw people smoking crack openly. And it was kind of a civilization that in decay. And it was more than just having some problems. The number of businesses that were boarded up was really, really sad. And there's a lot of reasons for that. Quite frankly, they did draconian COVID lockdowns that they still have not recovered from. and they sent those kids and locked them out of school, and those kids have not recovered. You hear about this massive learning loss. I can tell you in Florida, our fourth grade reading held strong. We did not lose a point in the NAEP from pre-COVID or after COVID because they were actually in school, and we forced that and made sure that they could do that. But you see kind of what's going on there, and it's sad, but I can tell you, I'm on the street and the firefighters, the fire trucks go by, and these firefighters are yelling out the window, thanking me. And then I have the San Francisco cops come up to me, thanking me for what we're doing in Florida because, they don't get support there. They are not treated the way they need to. And in Florida, we stand up for our first responders. We stand up for law enforcement and rule of law. And it makes a huge difference to have communities that are strong when you're getting those things right. It's not rocket science to get it right. You just have to be willing to put aside a lot of the political BS, a lot of the smoke that's out there, a lot of the cultural stuff, and just say, you know what? We're going to focus on basics, and we're going to get the basics right. And it doesn't matter what media says. It doesn't matter what activists say. North is north, and we're going to continue going in that direction. So I'm proud of the work that the legislature has done, proud of the work a lot of people at the local level have done in this state. There's a huge, and I have people tell me, the difference in energy being in like a San Francisco now or in LA, and then being in like Miami is like night and day. And that may not have been the case 20, 25 years ago, may have even been the opposite. So all that being said, don't take anything for granted. I think we make choices as people about how we want to be governed, and those choices have huge ramifications. And I don't think the choices were ever this stark in terms of once a place goes woke, then you have a series of policies that follow from that are very, very destructive. And what I saw was difficult to see. I think that it's just sad to see some place that used to be very vibrant basically be hollowed out. But we all run into people. I mean, I grew up right across the bay. I don't ever remember seeing a California license plate in my life as a kid. Now you see people, you talk to people, they tell stories about leaving and coming all the way across the continent to the free state of Florida. And so, that's a testament to what we've done for sure, and we're proud, but honestly, it's also a testament for them being pushed away. So let's not go down that road here in the state of Florida. All right, we will take some questions. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Governor. I have two quick questions for you. The first one being, Department of Homeland Security has formed an academic council, and one of the appointees is Randy Weingarten. And the job of this council is, quote, improving coordination, sharing of actionable threat and security-related information, including threats of violence, as well as targeted violence and terrorism prevention. I want to get your thoughts on that, and also your thoughts about the reports of China opening a base on Cuba.
There are a lot of people that have done a lot of damage in this country over the last few years since COVID. But I would say among the most damaging has been Weingarten as the head of the National Teacher Union, because she really led the effort to force schools to close. When we said in the summer of 2020, I think it was like June of 2020, COVID hysteria was still at fever pitch. We said every school district will be open for in-person instruction. If you care about kids and you care about education, you would have greeted that positively. I know a lot of the parents greeted it positively, even at the time when it was very controversial. She did not. The teacher union did not. They responded by suing us to try to lock kids out of school. They wanted a court to rule that we could not allow kids to be in school in person. And had we gone down that direction, there would have been devastating impacts to our youth. But there were many jurisdictions, because of that activism and because of the power that those unions have over school systems in places like Chicago, Los Angeles, San Francisco, where these kids had no chance. And the sad part about it is the people that would oftentimes be out in public advocating for school closures, a lot of times they got their kids private tutoring. They got their kid in a private in-person school. It was really the lower income, the working class families that bore the brunt of her school closures. And I think it's going to have a generational impact because you can't just keep a kid out for a year and deprive them of being able to do activities, all these things, and think that that's not going to have an impact. You know, it's hard enough growing up right now with all the influences out there. You just completely deprive them. So I just think it was totally deplorable, but I think it sent a message to parents across this country, you know, who are some of these people actually fighting for? They're not fighting for you as parents. In fact, they oppose parents' rights in school. They think the parents should butt out. They're not fighting for the school kids. Lord knows if they did, they would have moved hell or high water to try to get those kids in school. And the data was very clear. When we did it in Florida, yeah, it was controversial because of the narrative and everything. But if you actually sat down and looked at Sweden and some of these places, you knew we were doing the right thing. Wasn't easy politically, and we stood in the breach for people because it was the right thing to do. But this was not something that, and I remember the hysteria when the kids were going back, people, the national media, and I'm like, nothing's going to happen, okay? It's going to be fine, and we're going to be able to, we'll be able to get through it. And the same with our universities. You know, I told the universities in 2020, don't police the kids' social lives. Let them be students. And so you know what happened? They didn't. So our kids in Florida, where they were being isolated in other states, our kids in Florida, yeah, they would go out, they'd go to parties, they'd do this. Guess what? Some of them got COVID. Then guess what? They got over COVID, and then they went about their lives. How much better was it to just do that than to try to isolate them and restrict their freedom to just live normal lives? And so I think it was really bad. So she should not be in any position of authority. And you know, maybe someone will have something to say about that in about a year and a half to be able to get that right. In terms of the China, I mean, just think about how humiliating this is for the country. They flew a spy balloon clear across the continental United States with basically no pushback. Our people knew this balloon was coming, and yeah, they finally shot it after it had already gotten all the data that it needed and was already, you know, off the East Coast. And it's like, okay, is that a strong country to just allow that to happen? And then now the fact that China is potentially setting up eavesdropping military outposts in Cuba, 90 miles from southern Florida Keys, that is a slap in the face to this country. They do not fear Biden. They realize he's weak, and so they're taking advantage of the weakness. And I think what the CCP understands is they understand the language of strength. They understand if a leader is saying what they mean and meaning what they say and is willing to back it up, they're not going to mess with that. But if they have an opportunity to take some action and to advance their agenda in ways that they don't envision any pushback for, they're going to take that. So I think his whole approach to China has been flawed. They're now really bending over backwards, it seems, to try to get back in Xi's good graces. Meanwhile, China continues to increase their military. They continue to have an inordinate impact on our lives here in America with how much our economy is now dependent on things made in China. You know, you can't even get the ammunition we would need for a war unless you get stuff from China. You can't even refurbish our own nuclear arsenal unless you get stuff from China. And then what does Biden want to do? He wants to force everyone an electric vehicle. Well, guess what? Where do we get the materials to go into creating the batteries? From China. So it actually makes us more dependent on China. So I think there's a few things that we need to be doing. One, and we've taken action in Florida, combat CCP influence within our own country. We nixed the Confucius Institutes in the state of Florida. They put them in universities, colleges, and they're basically propaganda arms of the CCP. We said, not here. We signed legislation banning the purchase of land by CCP in Florida and related entities. They want farmland, they want land near military bases, not here, not on our watch. But they have influence in higher education. They have influence throughout our domestic economy. They have influence in things like entertainment, which, you know, the Soviet Union, yeah, they would have spies and stuff. They never, at the height of the Cold War, had this much influence over American society. So that's just one thing. The second thing is we need to be economically sovereign as a country. You know, it's one thing to say, you know, you deal with other countries, and of course we will have to do that. But to have so much critical issues in our country depend on China is not healthy. I don't think it's healthy for our industrial base, for our economy, for jobs, for all that. But certainly from a security perspective, it's a huge, huge problem. So we need to be doing more of that here in the United States. And then just finally, we have a limited capacity now to project power around the world. We had about 600 ships in Reagan's day. We got, about 280, 285 now. If you look at the Pacific Theater, I think that is the dominant theater for us in this decade and beyond. And we need to be able to project power. We need to be able to work with Japan, Korea, India, Australia, other allies in the region to be able to check Chinese expansionism and China's ambitions. And it all goes back to a bet that a lot of policymakers made in this country 20, 25 years ago, that if you put China on a pedestal, gave them most favored nation status, put them in the World Trade Organization, that they would become more democratic as they were able to, dump products into other people's markets. And in reality, the opposite has happened. Xi is more ideological than any ruler since Mao Zedong, and he's been more authoritarian than any Chinese ruler since Mao Zedong, and he's used a lot of that industrial strength, a lot of that wealth to make China a near-peer competitor to the United States. And so that was a failed experiment, and now we're in a situation where we've got to dig ourselves out of that and get on better footing so that we're doing what we need to do to protect the interests of the American people. Yes?
Former President Trump has continued to attack you and did again last night. Regardless of his attacks,
So what I would say is this. When you are saying that Cuomo did better on COVID than Florida did, you are revealing yourself to just be full of it. Nobody believes that. And you know why? And you know why I know that? Because I remember in 2020 and 2021 when he was praising Florida for being open, saying we did it much better than New York and Michigan, and everyone was coming to Florida, and that we were one of the great governors in the United States. And he used to say that all the time. Now, all of a sudden, his tune is changing. And I would just tell people, do you find it credible? Do you honestly find it credible? Would you have rather been in New York during COVID under Cuomo regime, or would you rather have been in the free state of Florida? And I probably can count the number of Republicans on my hand in the nation who would have rather been under Cuomo in New York, and we know that. And so these are just frivolous criticisms, but in some respects, I think it shows that, if you have to make that argument, then you probably don't have very good arguments, because the reality is everything he said about us for years, about how strong we were, how good we were, how we've delivered for the state, those happen to be true. And now he's trying to backtrack because he views he needs to do that. And he's saying things that are false. And so that's fine if you want to do it. I don't think people are going to buy it. I don't think it's going to ultimately matter in the end. I think we're going to be successful. But at the same time, you get into these processes, it's like, I want to beat Biden, okay? I will do that. I will get that done. And I think more importantly than that, I will actually bring these policies for a landing and get it all done up there. It's one thing to promise things, but when you don't deliver on it, then it's like, okay, then they get in and then they get to do stuff by the time they get in. So we'll do it. But it's a important process. And you respect the process and you respect the people's decisions, how this goes. But I'm very confident that those decisions are going to be positive for us. Back there, yes, sir. Which lawsuit is that? She's suing us every other day, it seems like. What was it about? It's about my staff? It's totally frivolous. So, we have staff in the executive office of the governor who in their private time have wanted to do things to be able to help our campaign. And so they've called friends, asked for support, donations, all this other stuff. They have every right to do that. They don't use state resources to do it. Of course not. But you have every right as a private citizen to be engaged and to be involved. And I would note, I have I'm on, so we have I've had 3 chiefs of staff. We had Shane for the first 2+ years. Adrian was always meant to be a short term. And then now we've had James. And Shane and Adrian are both huge supporters of our campaign. My current chief of staff in his spare time feels so strongly about it that he's out there helping and rustling up support. I also have on my campaign, my lead policy guy was my chief of staff when I was a U.S. congressman. He felt so strongly that he's moved, he and his wife moved to Florida from Washington, D.C. to be a part of our operation. And so I think it shows, these are people that have worked for us through the years, and here we are, and they're rallying support for me. That's not true about every other candidate. I mean, there's other candidates that a lot of the people that have worked for them, they're running for the hills. And they don't want to be a part of a future campaign. And so I think it shows that from the time we were involved in any of this stuff, we've basically been very mission-oriented. We've really asked a lot of people to just stay on target and get as much done. But I think a lot of people feel very, very strongly. So I think it's a very positive thing. I'm confident it was 100% totally compliant with anything. And I think it's just a great testament that people understand we need to change some things in this country. We're off kilter. We can't keep going like this. And so we really represent a restoration of sanity in this country. We represent a return to normalcy. You can't have communities being overrun by illegal aliens coming in. You can't have them be overrun by drugs and criminals. That's not what community life is supposed to be. And they know that we'll also restore integrity into institutions like our military, not have woke ideology, but commitment to mission. Our constitutional system, there's no 4 branches of government, there's 3. We don't have an administrative state that gets to operate on its own, not by design. It's doing that now. We're going to bring that to heel. We're going to restore proper integrity. So I think people realize that we need a change, and we represent that change. Okay, yes. So recent example. So Ashley ticked off a few. There, and she mentioned the Florida State, so that was relatively recent. So Florida State was on a presidential search. Richard Corcoran, who's now the president of New College in Sarasota, at the time he was the outgoing, well, not outgoing, he was commissioner of education, would have left if he got the Florida State job. And just the fact that he got floated as a potential candidate, this Sachs came out and threatened the entire accreditation of the university because they considered somebody to be the president. Oh, by the way, he was the commissioner of education over the 3rd largest state in the country, a state that's had rising scores, better performance. 25 years ago, Florida was not number 3 and 4 in the country in 4th grade reading and 4th grade math. That just was not true. And so there, he had a lot of accomplishments, a lot of great reforms. He had been Speaker of the House. So it's fine if you don't think that's your ideal candidate, but to say you lose accreditation for just potentially considering or putting someone in the hopper, is ridiculous. I think Ashley may have mentioned when they had the deadly hazing incident at Florida A&M, my predecessor suggested that maybe action needed to be taken against the president of the university. And then they basically chastised the governor for expressing an opinion. Again, this is a state publicly funded university. The idea that we should just have our head in the sand, regardless of what happens, you're paying for this university with your tax dollars. It would be dereliction of duty not to care about what was happening. And then in Georgia, the accreditor threatened funding of every single college and university in the state because there was a pending appointment of a former governor to oversee, I think they have like a board of regents overseeing the university system, and they did the same thing in South Carolina. So, you have a former governor, I believe it was Governor Perdue. He had also been the Secretary of Agriculture under the Trump administration. Guy had a heck of a resume, and the idea that somehow putting him as head of the university system would be something that you would lose funding over, this is just outrageous. And I can guarantee you, Perdue was appointed by a Republican governor. He was a Republican. if the shoe were on the other foot in terms of party, do you honestly think that Sachs would have issued that ultimatum? No way, no way. So they're pursuing their agenda, and the question is whose agenda should ultimately govern? The people's agenda? People elect. We had we had an election. All these folks ran. I ran. They made their decision. We talked about education a lot over the last 4 years, made the decision, and then here we go doing it. And should that ultimately be the agenda that governs, or should it be an agenda from some random accrediting body that none of us know, none of us have any impact over? They're just kind of out there floating around on their high horse doing whatever they want to do. Clearly, if you believe in constitutionally accountable government, you believe that it should be we the people that ultimately are channeling our interests through our elected representatives. And so that's what we're doing. I do think that more recently with the reforms I enunciate at the top of the press conference, Biden's folks are pushing back on this. I mean, they're sending these letters, these dear colleague letters, or whatever they call them. One of the counts in the lawsuit is that just sending a policy letter violates the Administrative Procedures Act. If you're going to promulgate a regulation under federal law, there's a process. You got to go. You have notice and comment and all this. All they do is send these letters. And what happens is most people, most states or private companies, if they get one of those letters from a federal agency, they fold because they know the federal government's powerful. We don't fold in Florida. We fight back in Florida, and that's why we're doing this today. We have rights as Floridians. We have rights under the 10th Amendment of the Constitution as a state to be able to govern our affairs this way without having extra constitutional or extra legal federal interference. Thanks, everybody. God bless.